Hi, and thanks for tuning in to the EndpointSecurity.ca podcast from Positive E Solutions. I'm Robbie Ferguson, and through the course of this podcast, combined with our blog, we want to provide you with a free resource to be able to educate yourself and your staff about the cybersecurity issues that are affecting you and your company in 2019. Here in Canada, we tend to take our infrastructure for granted. Light, power, water, even snow clearing. We can be pretty sure that all of these things will be taken care of for us, at least in our major cities and the surrounding areas. As a prosperous nation, we've grown accustomed to this degree of reliability, and although it's a nice way to live, it might be dulling our senses somewhat when it comes to staying on guard against threats to life and limb. There's always someone else out there who will do it for us. But what does this mean for cybersecurity? Are Canadians ready within the invisible world of connected technologies? In 2018, ESET published its Cybersecurity Barometer. It's a collection of poll results designed to assess people's attitudes towards cybercrime. The report was based on a sampling of 1,000 respondents, and it's available for download on our website, EndpointSecurity.ca. Its author, Stephen Cobb, a senior security researcher at ESET, points out that more than 80% of Canadians surveyed believe that the risk of becoming a victim of cybercrime is increasing, and 9 out of 10 Canadians now identify cybercrime as a serious challenge to the country's security, bigger than terrorism, corruption, and other criminal activity. So it sounds like Canadians certainly are tuned into the potential threat. To look at this in more detail, I've asked Stephen Cobb himself to elaborate. Welcome, Stephen.
Good to be here, Robbie.
Stephen, when we talk about Canadians as a population, we're basically lumping together private individual citizens as well as their roles as employees or business owners. Your research shows that they're aware of the cybersecurity and cybercrime threats, but are they actually doing anything about it?
Yes, they are, and that is, I think, some of the good news from the study. The study asked this question: what have you done in the last few years in response to your concerns about security and privacy online? All right, so yes, as you said in your intro there, Canadians really see this as a problem now, and one of the things that we wanted this barometer survey to do is take a measure of that level of concern in society. We did a parallel study in the United States, and the design of the study actually parallels one which is done in Europe every 2 years. So next year we'll be able to compare, actually now in 2019, later in the year we'll be able to compare Canadian responses, US responses with European responses to the same set of questions.
Okay.
And there's one question is, have you done something about this? And we found that about 40% of Canadians had done one or more of these things. Restrict themselves to using their own computer, right? And that's interesting. Not sharing the computer as much as they used to with other people. Only visiting websites they know and trust. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Stay Safe Online program of Stop, Think, Connect. It's their slogan about going on the internet. Stop, think, before you connect. Seems like Canadians, at least 40% of them, are doing that. Also, only opening emails from people I know was one of the responses. Again, got about 40% of people. Very good to hear relative to things like phishing attacks. And then about the same percent had installed software, security software like antivirus. And so, yeah, they are taking action. Not all of that action, though, would necessarily be good news on the business front if you think of businesses and even governments now relying on the internet for communication. So people are, to a certain extent, cutting back on some communication, some online usage. In terms of banking and online shopping, it's around 20%, saying they're doing less of that online. All right, so security response in terms of being more careful, taking precautions, good news for security, but potentially an issue long-term in terms of trust on the internet. So,
right.
Yeah, quite frankly, I use that to try and hit companies over the head with the need to do better on security.
It really boils down to the education piece, too. You mentioned about phishing scams, and I think about how spear phishing is really becoming a hot topic, and because it's a real concern. And the advice to, watch out for email and make sure that it's from someone you know, but it can sometimes look like it's from somebody that you know, even though it's quite potentially a malicious party. So there are software things that can, introduce anti-phishing, but I think it really boils down to understanding how those emails can be recognized, even if they look like, if it looks like Stephen Cobb is sending me that email and I know he's in cybersecurity and I can trust him, well, there are red flags that I watch out for, and we've spoken on that on our blog at blog.endpointsecurity.ca, and of course, there are some great resources that are available to you in recognizing those types of threats. Stephen, in the ESET Cybersecurity Barometer report, you wrote, and I'm going to quote you here, "Not only are individual people victimized by cybercrime, they elect the politicians who determine cybercrime policy, and they foot much of the tax bill for law enforcement efforts to reduce cybercrime. Knowing what the public thinks about cybercrime and cybersecurity is essential for successful cybercrime policy development and critical to success in society's cybersecurity efforts." So, Stephen, do you feel that Canadian politicians are in tune with the worries and the actual dangers that Canadians face?
So, me commenting about what politicians think could be tricky. And to be honest, I'll be completely honest here. I follow Canadian business more than I follow Canadian politics. So I don't want to speak, without. Well, I want to qualify what I say. Like, I'm not following this as closely, really, as I would like to, in terms of the details of Canadian responses. But more broadly, I think Canada is actually setting an example in this space because of a couple of things. Privacy regulations and laws in Canada have evolved quite differently from, for example, in the United States. And Canadian privacy law, I think, is in a better place than American privacy law. And you've had this very interesting development there, where the idea of privacy by design in technology, which is enshrined in things now like the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR in Europe, which has become really kind of a centerpiece of a lot of work in privacy and protection of data, came out of Canada. Dr. Cavoukian, who's there in Toronto now, was in a privacy role in government there, really pioneered this concept. And I think that has informed, over the last 10 years, a lot of developments in policy in Canada. To what extent, to your point about education, to what extent the government is doing education or pushing education around cybersecurity, for example, in the schools there, I'm not familiar with. But I think the area where I see the need for more resources from a government perspective and more awareness is politicians have a lot of things to worry about. And a natural tendency, since cybersecurity is a complicated issue, to sort of say, yes, we need to do more, but not understand really what all that takes. There's a lot of effort required, particularly around crime deterrence through prosecutions, arrests, indictments, and so on. One of the things we learned from criminology is that the biggest deterrent to a crime like stealing things, like burglary or many parts of cybercrime, is swift justice. A burglar won't stop burglaring if you double the penalty necessarily. And there have been actually interviews. So part of criminology I would have loved to have gotten into is going into prison and talking to convicted criminals. And I say, well, look, would you carry on being a burglar at the current sentencing rate, which states 5 years? Yeah. And then, well, what if we double that to 10 years? Would you quit? I was like, no. Well, why? I only do it because I don't think I'm going to get caught. If I thought there was a high chance of me getting caught, I wouldn't do this. And quite frankly, there's a whole bunch of cybercrime where your chances of getting caught today are very, very low. So that's an area where, focused action can really produce results. And we are starting to see that. And kudos to RCMP and other law enforcement people cooperating cross-border and particularly internationally. This is where we need a lot of focus, is on that international cooperation, so that the people who are carrying out the cyber crimes are identified very quickly, and they are fingered very quickly, or to use a legal term, indicted. And some people will say, well, look, we've indicted a bunch of hackers in, let's say Russia, for example. That's not going to deter them, because we're not ever going to arrest those people.
Right.
And that's not true, right? And also, even if you live in Russia and get indicted by the United States, that's a bad thing, because if you leave Russia, you're going to be setting off alarms. And that's how several criminal hackers, and not just from Russia, have been caught, is they go on vacation to somewhere sunnier, and they take a trip. It sets off alarms at Interpol. They get picked up, and so that activity is very valuable. Our law enforcement, certainly here in the United States, doesn't have the resources that they should have to do that. Of course, there are a lot of other crimes which get money too, and part of it is setting priorities. But to my earlier point about some people not using the internet as much as they could because they're worried about it being an unsafe place, there's actually a societal dividend and a commercial dividend to decreasing the amount of cybercrime, so more people can trust the internet and make full use of it.
Yeah, and Stephen, we know, and maybe, some of us don't really realize that we're all essentially connected through the internet. Not only are these, specific attacks from, as your example, Russian hackers, for example, but like a device or even a file somewhere else on the planet might end up being the very piece that infects a company here in Canada or a government office through a wide collection of pathways. There are loads of endpoints and connections that, all of our devices are connected. That's why, of course, ESET and companies like it exist. But if we were to draw up a list of actions or steps that people could take to truly be prepared against cybersecurity threats like that, both as individuals and within the workforce, what would that list contain?
Well, in terms of specific steps, it would be a very long list. And I really don't like to overwhelm people with long lists. I think, one thing I would say is that you want to have a good piece of security software on whatever your point of contact is. So on your computer, on your laptop, on your phone, on your tablet, you want to have security software on there. That's for sure. But I think a bigger thing we all need, and to your point about the variety of devices out there, is what I would call maybe situational awareness. Being aware that if you buy an internet-connected toy for your children, or an internet-connected phone, internet-connected camera, all our phones are internet-connected, an internet-connected camera at home, it is on the internet. And it becomes, as to your point, an attack vector. And you might say, well, I don't put anything useful on that. Well, that's kind of not the point. It will look for useful things, right? So, for example, if you've got something recording in your home, recording your voice or pictures, and you're not aware of it, that can lead to problems. And so I think one of the things which publications like yours are working on is putting out the word about this connectivity and the fact that it's two-way. Now, we can control it to a great degree through things like security software. I mean, as we were setting up our conversation today, I got an alert popped up on my screen. Software wants to access your camera. Is that okay? It's like, yeah, that's okay for this.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, we know we're about to do an interview, so
right. Yeah. That's good, right? But it's that level of control that you need. And I think, to keep an eye on what's happening out there. What my team, the security research group here in North America, and the global research teams of ESET all publish their findings on welivesecurity.com, which is a place people can go. They actually subscribe to the newsletter, comes out once a week, keep you up to date on the things that are happening. Mm-hmm. And just to give you an example, the first thing I do in the morning, make my coffee, open up my phone for the latest news. And one of my colleagues had published an analysis of Android software that can steal your cryptocurrency wallet number, right?
Oh.
And so you go, wait a minute. Yeah, there are people who are into cryptocurrency, things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and yes, they have a wallet on their phone and they pay people on their phone. This piece of software monitors your clipboard. And I don't know if you've used digital currency, but one of the key parts of it is this very, very long number that is your wallet number. And it's not a number I think any human being can memorize. So you're always having to type it, and a lot of people put it in their clipboard and cut it and paste it. So the malicious code looks for that, and then as it pastes it, it changes it to their number.
Wow.
And so instead of paying whoever it is you're paying with your Bitcoin, you're paying them. And I think it's a good example, even for people who don't use Bitcoin, of the level of deviousness and creativity, if you will, in the malicious world, in the crime world. So whatever it is we're using to live the digital life, somebody's looking to abuse that for money. And just that situational awareness can help. And to your earlier point about phishing, it's still probably it's the most popular line of attack for a criminal, and people can learn. I was mentioning before the broadcast, my mom turns 90 next year. She will still send me phishing emails she spotted, where she's one of the first people to actually spot it. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of Canadians will know this, that in England you have TV licenses, right? You have to buy a license if you have a TV. My mom got an email saying she was going to be arrested because she hadn't paid for a TV license. And she immediately sent it to me. She said, I'm an old age pensioner. We don't have to pay for our TV license. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So clearly, it's a phishing email.
Sure. And the fact is if that applies to 1 in every 10 people, that's 10% of people going, I better check into this if they're not careful.
So she also knows to hover the mouse over the email address or the links in it. Mm-hmm. And if it's Netflix telling you have to contact them about your account and the link is to somewhere in Brazil, mm-hmm. then it's a fake. Mm-hmm. And I guess that situationally aware is probably the main thing, and make sure you keep up with the news in cybersecurity.
Thanks, Stephen. Your insight, both here and in the ESET report, is highly valuable. Everything's indeed connected, and we've been learning that there appears to be no expiration date on the data that's out there. Stephen, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Here at endpointsecurity.ca, we're obviously very concerned about the safety and security of our customers, their businesses, and their data. But as our chat here shows, the concern can't end there. We have a blog that follows on from this conversation. You can find it at blog.endpointsecurity.ca. And just a reminder that it contains a link to the ESET Cybersecurity Barometer report. As always, as you know, our close relationship with the experts at ESET means we at Positive eSolutions have your back. So thanks again to my guest, Stephen Cobb, for joining me today, and thank you for being here as well. Stay safe out there, and be sure to come back again for the next chapter in our ongoing series on cybersecurity for Canadian business. From endpointsecurity.ca, from Positive eSolutions, I'm Robbie Ferguson.